Hi, welcome back to another stream, a little bit livelier than the last one. Sorry for that. Again, very low energy on Wednesday. Once again, Chris is not going to make it. He is on the train between Crimea and Moscow, somewhere in the great wide spans of Russia. And so he will be with us again on Wednesday. I know in the episode description, it does mention Putin in India. We're going to save that for when Chris gets back to Moscow, so Chris can give us the sort of inside of Russia viewpoint. I'll save that for him. It is not me solo. Do not get excited. I have a good friend with me from a great book club and a group of people that I really enjoy listening to. And I'm hoping that this kind of gets you guys broken into a sort of new area, maybe a new sort of intellectual scape. We are going Putin. Is that it? You want me to say it like a British person? Putin. But anyway, yes. Also, we won't be covering today, but do keep in mind that there is a failed coup in Benin that is still kind of in a volatile situation, and the Thai-Cambodia war has reignited. One of Trump's famous wars that he ended, but we also won't be covering that today. But let's get started. So I have a guest host here, my friend Doug. Why don't you tell the viewers who you are, how I found you, and how I basically strong-armed you into doing our stream today.
So I'm just some guy. You probably originally found me through one of Dumernatt's or Marcel's spaces. It's affiliated with the sort of Property and Freedom Book Club crew. They're a bit more paleo-libertarianish than I am, very into Austrian school economics, but the anti-war thing is sort of the unifying, litmus test for that milieu.
I agree. So we're going to cover a few topics today. So obviously, as you guys know, today is a date which will live in infamy, Pearl Harbor Day. We'll also get into Trump's new national defense strategy, Pam Bondi's leaked memo to put us all on the naughty list in time for Christmas. I'm sure we're already on it. As well as two, we'll just say Zionist summits in New York City this week, and maybe a small update on Venezuela. But let's get started. So today, a date which will live in infamy. Our own government obviously had cracked Japan's codes and knew the attack was coming, moved the carriers out of port ahead of time, letting sailors and civilians die. One of our first false flags, or largest false flags. But now I guess that segues well into Trump's national defense strategy, the brand new one. It just dropped. For the first time since 1945, someone in the Pentagon is finally admitting the game is rigged against the American people. On page 1, and you guys should actually go and read through this if you have a chance. There's a full PDF. You read through the national security strategy and sort of the pivot that he wants to make back to Latin America. It seems more of a Monroe Doctrine type. The highest priority of the United States military is the defense of the American homeland and the Western Hemisphere, stressing the Western Hemisphere, not Taiwan, not Ukraine, or the Middle East. They're calling it the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. They're saying no more sacrificing American blood and treasure so globalists can play risk with other people's countries. So, Doug, have you read or heard about the new NDS? And do you have any thoughts on this sort of Trumpian, Monroevian strategy?
Yeah, so between the time you said you needed a co-host and now, I was sort of reading through a little bit of that. And basically, my take is it seems to be an early admission of the end of a unipolar American world hegemony. It seems to be a drawing back to the sort of traditional U.S. gross realm in the Western Hemisphere. And it fits in with a lot of statements from Trump, from Vance, even from Hegseth and Rubio, um, of the U.S. playing less of a role in Europe, pushing for example, German rearmament, while the U.S. will focus more on the Western Hemisphere once again. Seems to be the general sort of thinking going into this.
Yeah, and the general theme throughout is the rejection of endless wars.
Mhm.
which, I mean, I think we can all get on board with that. It builds on the May 2025 memorandum from SecDef, well, SecWar now, delayed internal changes. Overarching goal is to deter aggression through military overmatch while conserving resources for domestic threats like migration and cartels, drug cartels, mass migration, and foreign influence in Latin America as direct homeland risks. Venezuela highlighted as a nexus for gangster operatives. While I don't agree with that, I think I understand and agree with this American strategy. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of have to view this through the lens of the Israel issue. Last show, you went over the Isaac Accords, and with this, like, all of these more Washington-aligned states are also more Israel-aligned states. For example, the ruling coalitions tend to have Christian Zionists in them rather than sort of Catholic left is the main opposition to that. Well, Catholic left nationalists, perhaps. And you'll see a lot of exaggeration. Like, of course, Venezuela has a good relationship with the Lebanese resistance and with Iran, but there's the idea that Hamas or Hezbollah are going to use these Latin American states as platforms for attacks within the U.S. Seems to be part of the justification for example, the Isaac Accords, and that's not plausibly going to happen.
Yeah, and we're going to tap into the Isaac Accords a little bit more again today because it literally ties into a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and that also taps into if you guys do go through the PDF on pages 6 through 12, it discusses the threat environment. That's where you'll see that, and then in the strategic priorities and capabilities 13 through 20, they start talking about getting out of Europe, urging self-reliance for Europe to avoid civilizational erasure. So that's probably that immigration element they've been bringing up a lot lately, and cultivate resistance to migration and influence. But it takes a very hands-off approach. In the Middle East, it says reduce footprints and treat it as an investment hub for U.S. AI energy defense exports. And the Indo-Pacific deterrence will be to overmatch China via forward presence, economic nationalism to decouple critical dependencies. And obviously, we discussed the plan for the Western Hemisphere. So, yeah, exactly. It's this pivot away from, it's kind of a modification of Obama's pivot to Asia, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, the Indo-Pacific stuff especially resembles that. That's something the U.S. has been sort of talking about doing since 2000-ish. There's a few difficulties there, like Vietnam, Japan, Australia, South Korea, India, trying to form all of those countries into like big Indo-Pacific version of NATO is a bit difficult in that they all have different relationships with China already, and they're just so spread out that their regional political interests aren't going to be super similar. So that's something that a lot of American diplomatic minds have tried to figure out how one would go about that. And I'm not super impressed with the caliber of personnel in the current State Department. The new Trump crowd. So, like, I'm not sure how much more effective it will be than Obama's attempt at the same 10 years or more than 10 years ago by now.
Well, you mentioned in the beginning, you said, multipolarity is almost inevitable. And,
Yeah.
do you think that this kind of, and for lack of a better word, a little bit of cope saying, you know what, we're just going to focus on our pole, which is would be the Western Hemisphere in the multipolar theory. They would be. This is kind of like multipolar cope. Like, all right, guys, we'll just change our national defense strategy to kind of line up with the inevitable. So it kind of looks like we planned this.
Yeah, and the Signal chat that leaked had J.D. Vance, Hegseth, Waltz, and unintentionally perhaps Goldberg from the Atlantic. Vance was doing sort of Vance was doing sort of the sour grapes bit about how, oh well, we didn't want to be involved in Europe anyway. Like we don't like them. Yes, sort of sour grapes vibes going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Another article came out today. We're not going to cover it, but or it might have been yesterday, but it said, Trump hates the European elites, and now it's very clear, or something like that. Now there's no denying it, something along those lines. But yeah, there is an animosity to the sort of shit libby WEF European elites from the Trump administration. Let's take a look at this clip of Hegseth. This is his speech following the release of the National Defense Strategy. This should tell you exactly what he wants.
Focus. As a result, the War Department will not be distracted by democracy building, interventionism, undefined wars, regime change, climate change, woke moralizing, and feckless nation building. We will instead put our nation's practical, concrete interests first. We will deter war. We will advance our interests. We will defend our people. Peace is our goal. And in service of that objective, we will always be ready to fight and win decisively if called upon. As part of this mission, we are asking American taxpayers to fund the world's greatest military. We're asking mothers and fathers across America to trust us with their most precious resource, their sons and daughters. And we will honor their trust and their sacrifice.
So we're contracting back into our hemisphere, but we still need your sons and daughters and $1 trillion defense budget.
Yeah, that statement read as trying to have his cake and eat it too. He was saying the U.S. will be aggressive in defending its interests abroad, but also will be less involved abroad. Just sort of the things we're not doing. It's a bunch of negative connotation words. And then the things we will be doing, it's a bunch of positive connotation synonyms of the first list.
So that's your national defense strategy. Also this week that leaked out of not the national defense strategy didn't leak, but Pam Body's domestic terror dragnet. This week a leaked justice memo revealed the Trump administration's blueprint for a new war on terror, except the enemies are inside the United States. If you guys get a chance to, please read through this. This was leaked by Kenton Klippenstein. On December 4th, Attorney General Pam Bondi issued a directive to all federal prosecutors, law enforcement agencies, and DOJ grant offices. It orders the FBI to compile a list of domestic terrorist organizations, use all available tools to investigate, map, and dismantle these groups, offer cash rewards for arrests, retroactively investigate up to 5 years protest-related activity, target individuals and organizations for prosecution, surveillance, and grant defunding. And no idea what makes anyone a domestic terrorist under this, but from the memo, it says anyone who expresses opposition to law and immigration enforcement, extreme views in favor of mass migration and open borders, adherence to radical gender ideology, anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, or anti-Christianity. The 8-part federal action plan is to compile the list, launch the investigations, recruit informants, use joint terrorism task forces, prioritize charges like seditious conspiracy, RICO, and obstruction, incentivize tips with cash rewards, disseminate intelligence bulletins on Antifa and other anarchist groups to local law enforcement, and prioritize federal grants for police departments that focus on domestic extremism. I heard you chuckle or scoff. What are your thoughts on this new plan?
Well, so first of all, this plan does sort of go to great lengths to say that we won't be looking at people for First Amendment protected activity. It will only be for things which are already federal crimes, which in that case, this would just be okay, everyone at DOJ, just do everything you were going to do anyway, but be more cooler while you do it. But no, in the first Trump administration, we did see something like political prosecution of various both left and right street activist groups. Later down in the memo in the footnotes, it brings up 2 federal appellate cases related to Rundo's Rise Above movement. It's sort of a Proud Boy-ish, but more explicitly white group that's like of the far right of the first Trump era. And those cases were basically about trying to limit I think it's US v. Rundo and US v. somebody else. But no, those appeals decisions were basically limiting some of the overbroad crimes which this kind of memo is intended to prosecute. Like, I think in those two cases, it was like the crime of encouraging people to riot. So Bondu's trying to phrase it in such a way that, we're not going to politically prosecute anyone. While, I mean, that's the only reason why you'd really issue such a memo. It's that you're going for political prosecution. I mean, the ideologies they're going after are listed at the top.
Who do you think will determine who gets placed on this list? Like this idea of anti-Americanism, because when we've seen, because she specifically, she names like being anti-government, anti-immigration, anti-capitalism, anti-Christian, she names. So we've learned over the last 2 years that anti-Americanism also kind of is an umbrella term that includes anti-Zionism.
Yes, yeah, that's it.
So that's the part that
campus protests, looking at how the people who are currently in the DOJ were reacting to those. Anti-Zionism is the main thing they'd be going after here.
And I wanted to use that definitely as a segue, as well as this. This is a post we always share Gen X Girl on here. I'll share her again. Israel is hosting an Ambassadors for Israel Summit. What was supposed to be confidential invitations, and Christian preachers were invited. There's over 1,000 of them there. They're being indoctrinated so they can come home and spread the good word, I guess. That brings us into our events of this week. So I don't know if you guys saw, but the DealBook Summit. The DealBook Summit is hosted every year in New York City. It's a who's who of Wall Street, DC, and Silicon Valley. This one was quite a reaction to the NDS and the tariffs. It's hosted by Andrew Ross Sorkin at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And it shows a lot about America's economic pivot. It's a one-day high-end conference put on by the New York Times, where the most powerful people in finance, tech, and politics do long-form, on-the-record interviews in front of 1,000 paying attendees. Started in 2011. Purposes are money, influence, and obviously to flex for the New York Times. There were a bunch of speakers here, including the president of Taiwan. Why, I don't know. Scott Bessent, who defended tariffs as evolutionary. Gavin Newsom, who talked bad about Trump and crony capitalism. Erica Kirk, who talked about leaving the boss babe lifestyle for Charlie or something. Larry Fink and Brian Armstrong. And Mr. Beast, who I think I wanted to make a point, because he's kind of making a very clear entrance into this sort of money laundering, philanthropy, sort of tech bro side with his rabbi, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, or perhaps they're just trying to bring 8-year-olds into events like this. I mean, there's plenty of 8-year-olds in the audience who may be fascinated by events like this that the New York Times is hosting. I assume that's what's going on.
Yeah, we're getting the kids into Sorkin's DealBook Summit. Oh my God. Guys, just so you know, I watched this entire summit. I do not recommend. But what I did was I pulled out the clips that I thought were the most interesting, and I love to get your thoughts. Of course, they are Alex Karp. Now, I love Alex Karp because I feel like he's such a walking contradiction, but he has so much power. And I really listen to what he says, because maybe he's crazy, but the people around him are tasked with getting his ideas to fruition. So let's take a look at some of what he said. I didn't speed these up. He's just completely on crack.
I want to get into all of that, but I'll tell you where I want to start. I want to start with this. You wrote a book last year called The Technological Republic, and you quote Samuel Huntington in it, that argues the following, argues that the rise of the West was not made possible, quote, by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, but rather by its superiority in applying organized violence. What do you mean by that? And is that what Palantir ultimately does?
Well, I think one of the most interesting about that quote is it's indisputably and obviously true.
You genuinely believe that the U.S., this
don't-
idea of ideas, values, religion has nothing to do with it. You think it really is about organizing violence?
No. Sorry, I didn't say that our ideas aren't important. Obviously, I come from an academic family, and I was planning to be an academic before I realized it was worthless, and I'd be better at building things. But
we should talk about that too.
But like, okay, one of the biggest problems we have in our elite institutions, especially our Ivy Leagues, is this indisputable truth that no one would listen to the spirit of our ideas if our ability to organize in violence was inferior. That every single person in the world believes, outside of the faculty of Harvard, and certainly all of our adversaries know to be true, is viewed as something that's kind of worthy of great discussion and dispute. And the primary reason they dispute it, honestly, is because at their core, they want to undermine the superiority of Western values, which are meritocracy, rule of law, accepting that inputs and outputs are not the same, that are the basis of building the superiority on the military plane.
What are your? I love Samuel Huntington. I'm actually reading Huntington right now. I'm reading Who Are We? Rereading Who Are We? But what do you think about the quote that he utilized and that he says it's objectively true?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I noticed in his speech was he was trying to do a populist maneuver against the Harvard elites as the CEO of Palantir. That's just the main thing that stood out to me.
He does that a lot, so you'll get more chances to point that out. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
But no, it's like this man is the elite, but it's this thing within the national populist sphere where you have to present yourself as fighting an imaginary like anti-war elite which doesn't want to, which isn't going to let us do the wars we want to do. So it's taking a populist pose for an elite position, which is strange, but I guess he's decided it works, so he might keep doing that.
It is really interesting, and he keeps doing it throughout this interview. And I was actually going over the clips with a friend, and I was like, "Did this guy just say working class?" He just says it like a bunch of times in the interview. It's crazy. I'm like, wait, we have to find out who he means by the working class, because certainly he can't mean the actual working class. But let's take it out here. He calls himself a progressive.
I want to talk about you for a second and your own politics and your shift in politics. By the way, there's a piece in the Washington Post about you this morning that gets into some of this. You grew up
only because I have great respect for you. I don't interrupt you immediately. I didn't shift my politics. The political parties have shifted their politics. The idea that what's being called progressive is in any way progressive is a complete farce. I've been progressive since the beginning of Palantir. I'm continue to be progressive. I grew up in a highly intellectual, mostly Jewish, incredibly left-wing environment. And every Saturday and every Friday, I heard a lecture about how the conservatives are going to destroy this country with illegal immigration because it's going to undermine the fabric of the American worker. That was 50 years ago. That's what it means to be a progressive. And being a progressive doesn't mean just, it feels so good to be involved in dysfunction, things that can never work, a form of socialism that's never worked, having no meritocracy. That's not progressive. That's honestly cowardly. And most people half my old party knows it. They don't speak up. It's bullshit. It will never work. And it does not help. You know, the biggest problem with that is it's not helping the poor people that they claim to serve. If you think that's helping a black person in the inner city, you're ridiculous. The last thing anyone in this country needs is a dysfunctional educational system and handouts that have never worked and are not going to work.
He's worried about the working class and black guys in the inner cities with Palantir?
BLM activist Alex Karp. But no, it's the
in a left-wing household. Now
yeah, so that implies to me that like the central theme running through that is Zionism. That like that's the central ideological current, and which other ideological bits you want to tack onto that is just whatever's most convenient.
I agree, and it's kind of this idea that, well, he's talked about it. I don't know if he really goes over it too much in these clips, but about how Zionism is kind of, or the ideas or the things that are required to uphold the ideology of Zionism are necessary and therefore morally good. And so maybe in his mind, he still is a progressive. Because
Yeah.
I don't even, I'm trying to make an excuse for Alex Karp's mentality, and I don't know that I can. But well, let's continue. Here he is on Trump.
We stand for the rule of law. We stand for competence, and we call out the complete bullshit that there's. Okay, on the far right, they don't like us because they think I'm somehow a Jewish conspiracy because 2 of the 4 or 5 co-founders are Jewish. I'm like, okay, great. You know, a lot of Jews are successful. It's not all conspiracy. It is a fact. Those are just the facts. Our company. So the obvious answer is yes. Then there's the more subtle answer. All these countries and people I defend in public, like Israel's a perfect example. I think most of the critiques of Israel, not all, but a lot of people just have like Israel derangement or Jewish derangement syndrome. It's like they're like hobbyists. It's like they think about Jews all day. It's like, I don't know. I grew up in the Jewish community. How often do you think about Jews? I don't think about Jews very often. So it's like, hey, of course I'm going to defend in a way publicly that I can assure you privately, people have less present conversations than the one we're having. Like I told the Israeli government from the beginning, maximum violence to the people organizing violence, minimal violence to the people on the front end. I told every single person.
Do you think that they lived up to that?
I don't even know what he's saying, but he said maximum violence. I know that. I had what are do you have any thoughts on that?
So, I mean, he basically covered what I was thinking he might in the last segment I did here, where his Jewish identity, his pro-Israel stances do seem to be the primary. Like, if he calls himself a progressive, that's what progressivism means to him. If tomorrow he called himself a conservative, that's what conservatism would mean to him. It's like principally combating anti-Semitism, promoting Israeli goals in what he views the most effective way possible seems to be the core of his politics and, in a way, his business.
You bring up a really good point. That's going to he exemplifies it by this clip. We've talked about it countless times on the stream in spaces. The elites don't have a political party or a core ideology. Watch, he explains it right here.
Palantir, we believe we're notoriously good at being right.
Alex, you founded this company with
not at persuading people we're right. We leave that to the New York Times.
You co-founded this company with Peter Thiel. And for a long time, there was a view that Peter, who's been on this stage many times, was the conservative and you were the progressive, and that served the interests actually of the company in a certain way because you were effectively bipartisan. I'm curious how you think now that there's a view that you and Peter are all in with this administration in particular, that if in fact Democrats come to take over the White House in 28 or 32 or whatever it is in the future, that will make it more complicated for the company.
Well, first of all, I don't think that view, like most of these views, makes any sense. I'm an independent. My vote is up for grab. If you are willing to talk about having a closed border and maintaining deterrence, so I don't think that's at all true. And I'll tell you something else that's true. If the Democrats, my former party or current party or however you want to look at it, ran someone who agreed with me, even in private, they would win. So, maybe you should stop winning in the faculty lounge and start winning. We have a saying we're apparently not supposed to say anymore, but we always said we're cold in the streets and hot in the sheets. Democratic Party should think about that one a lot. Okay.
So much to unpack here. So Alex Karp is the progressive of the two, but Peter Thiel, the gay guy, surrounded by like debauchery and degeneracy, is the conservative. This is a really interesting inversion.
Yeah, and I think in a way this helps to get to a point that he was implying that a lot of these foreign policy issues, which are really important to Palantir, are bipartisan, or at least the dissent from each is like a small portion of each party, and these issues don't clearly line up along party lines. So I could certainly see Thiel and Karp doing well under a Democratic administration, which has basically the same foreign policy as the current one.
Yeah, he just wants them to be a little bit hotter in the sheets. That was probably him once again trying to be hip. I don't know. But if that was like, we're getting closer and closer to hell. We're going like in the rings of hell. So now let's go into Israel Hayom. So DealBook was Wall Street's therapy session. Israel Hayom Summit in New York City was the pro-Israel crowd's war room, hosted by Netanyahu's favorite paper, Unpacking Anti-Semitism Hostages and the Trump Pivot. Interestingly, and I want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind, this is the first one ever in the United States. And of course, they chose to do it in New York City. Huge theme is Mamdani, all the way through and through, that are very upset by the Mamdani election. So obviously it was hosted on December 2nd, Hilton Midtown, Manhattan. The host was Israel Hayom, which is Israel's top daily newspaper. It's founded in 2007 by Sheldon Adelson. Obviously now Miriam owns it. Moderated by a journalist. And the theme was Together Shaping Tomorrow. I always tell you guys that the Zionists are planning for the century and beyond, the millennia. They're not planning for the next 5 years or the next administration or the midterms. And this, you'll see it throughout this. There's a very interesting pivot that they're taking. So this whole thing is to back this program called the 11th Million, which is a push to bring 1 million Jews to Israel within the next decade. That is backed by the Adelsons. Omer Lachmanovich, one of the people that is involved with Israel Hayom and the 11th Million, said, the 11th Million is not just a Zionist vision, but a growth engine. Suppose we know how to make Israel a home for engineers, entrepreneurs, educators, medical professionals, and young families from around the world. In that case, we will create a strategic advantage for an entire generation. This is an opportunity we cannot miss. We at Israel Hayom are proud to take part in turning the vision into reality. I'm starting to think that Gaza is supposed to be Dubai to the Israelis UAE.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's going on here. Some speakers, and I have the speakers list here. You guys should go look at it yourselves because I think this is a little bit small. But here you guys see it's a who's who, whatnot. Eric Adams, John Fetterman, just the usual suspects, as well as influencers sprinkled throughout. And the queen herself, Hillary, made an appearance. But first, I want to show you, it was opened by Miriam Adelson. These people talk so slow. This was a 7-hour conference. I think it could have been done in 2. This is Miriam Adelson. I've sped her up 2 times. That's how slow she speaks. But here, guys, listen to what she says.
Shalom. Ambassador Waltz, Rabbi Berman, is it still kosher to say that in the Big Apple, it is the peace that we wish upon others when we meet or part ways? It is the peace that the Jewish people and the state of Israel have always pursued for the good of the entire world. The fact that our enemies refuse to acknowledge it is a tragedy as old as our history. They insist on portraying us as precisely the opposite, from Pharaoh to Spanish Inquisition, from pogroms to the Nazi concentration camp. We have survived the worst of them. And we have learned the hard way to be prepared, to defend ourselves, to always stand tall, to draw support through strength and not through sympathy. I was born in Tel Aviv to parents. Who had lost most of the family to the Holocaust. When the time came for me to do postgraduate research abroad, I looked at America, then to New York. For generations, Jewish Yiddish speakers would call America the Golden Medina, or the land of gold, not just for the economic opportunities that they have here, but also the freedom of persecution. It was here that I met the love of my life, Sheldon, the proudest of Jewish Americans. And now, anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head in this city, home of the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. Am I surprised? The answer is no. They want to split Israel from the West and for diaspora Jews. They want to destroy us slowly through isolation, separation, defamation, and demoralization. We owe it to those past generations of powerless Jews who would have happily traded place with us today. And we owe it to our children and the generation to follow to ensure that they too can shout out loud, Am Israel Chai.
Sorry, I did play a lot of her. I see the chat's not very happy. But I wanted to show that, she grew up with this idea that the United States was the golden Medina. And this idea of their ownership of New York is sort of tailored throughout this conference. And they're afraid of sort of losing their golden Medina. Do you have any thoughts on or reaction to the Miriam Adelson Open?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that struck out to me was trying to have it both ways with like the proud Sabra thing, who doesn't need to complain about anti-Semitism anymore, is free, but also then complaining about anti-Semitism from Mamdani.
It's always like that. It's always doublespeak and the irrationality.
Yeah, this.
Go
I
on.
was just saying it's a really remarkably blatant interference in like not just federal but municipal level American politics. In the group chat, I came up with the comparison. It was like people called Trump a Russian asset in the first administration, but like you couldn't imagine the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights attending a conference against Russophobia that was attended by Russian billionaires, organized by Rossiyskaya Gazeta, attended by the mayor on his way out, condemning his successor for not being pro-Russia enough. Like, that would just be unimaginable from any other country doing this.
I know, and I'm so glad you put it that way, because I think people are just almost desensitized to this. And this is a woman, she's telling you, I grew up in Tel Aviv, I lived in Tel Aviv, I spent all of my formative years in Israel. I did not come to America until I was in college, where I obviously met my husband. And now she is the most powerful force in American politics right now, thanks to her, the passing of her husband. And that's kind of scary.
Yep.
Someone who grew up with the idea that the United States is some golden calf, or that it was like this promised land for the Jews of Tel Aviv, is just, it's wild. But and the worship of the Adelsons throughout the conference, I'm only going to play a little bit of it, but you can see it again. Just these people, it's like laying the palm fronds at their feet. Not just the Jews, the Christians as well. This is Waltz. I believe Waltz is a evangelical Christian. I don't have the clip here, and I must have misplaced it, but he does look right at them and he says, when Miriam tells us to go somewhere, we go, we make it happen. And it's like, okay. And just like we talked about with the Isaac Accords, and again, this is why I try to weave all of this stuff together. The Isaac Accords, one of the most biggest issues in them that you can see the Israelis are nervous about is the support at the UN. That theme was also woven throughout this conference about the UN being anti-Semitic and the need to fix the votes in the UN and how skewed it is against the Israelis. This is our ambassador to the UN talking on that topic.
The one day, because it seems no country at this point would like to fight Hamas other than Israel.
Sure, and I've heard a lot of those concerns as we work through this resolution. Let me just take 30 more seconds before I answer that question on the anti-Semitism piece at the UN. I just want everyone here to know the actions the Trump administration is taking, that we are taking within the UN to fight this scourge. I mean, this is a place that passed 171 resolutions condemning Israel, compared to 51 condemning ridiculous and gross human rights violators, 51 for every other country combined. So it is obsessed in many ways as an institution. Anti-Semitism undergirds all of it. In this administration, we are going after it. We are taking it head on. We're not turning a blind eye. We have sanctioned Francesca Albanese, the so-called special rapporteur, to Marco. Thank you to Secretary Rubio for that. We have withdrawn from UNESCO. We have withdrawn from the air quotes Human Rights Council and defunded, and we'll continue to defund. And if we have it the administration's way, completely dismantle UNRWA. So we are not putting up with the BDS and just all of the other nonsense.
Any specific steps you can announce here about how to fight?
I don't want to get ahead of the administration, but I can tell you that is clearly our goal.
don't want to get ahead of the administration, but don't worry because Pam Bondi's plan already leaked. You're all going on a list. So everybody, this idea that like the votes at the UN are like overwhelmingly not pro-Israel and that it must be the result of some sort of irrationality or brainwashing that we can fix. It's not the result of us being wrong. We have to fix what being wrong means.
Yeah, does Thailand have a grand history of anti-Semitism that's motivating how it votes at the UN or something?
Yeah, we gotta make that, and that's in the Isaac Accords. They talk about like I think it even names Venezuela. It says Venezuela has supported or voted against Maduro. They say Maduro has voted against Israel 70 times. He's got to go. It's really insane. It's not like this. Like we'll just change the way that people view things instead of. Which reminds me of a clip of that Yemeni Jewish woman. She's very crazy, but she has like the spider hands. And she said, "We are the chosen people because we were chosen to show the rest of you what right is wrong, what is right and what is wrong, and to hold up a mirror to you and show you that." So maybe they get to determine what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
We just got to work on that right now.
Yeah, that's the logic there. It's also kind of remarkable because like this whole idea of neutral international law and states being equal, this was an important logic to the 47 then 48 partition plans. Like Israel is a UN creation originally. So torpedoing all of these structures of post 45 international law for like that shows a sort of desperation that for the institutions basically created around this state are no longer sufficiently subservient, so therefore we're just going to blow them up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important reminder that the only reason Israel exists is at the behest of the UN, and it's a very interesting thing that they're like, yeah, they're sort of gutting it instead of destroying it. Which I thought, like when we were going through this ordeal with the UN, and I thought that between the United States and Israel, that they would have preferred to destroy the UN, but I see that they would prefer to keep this skeleton and sort of fix what's inside. And again, we talked about it last week in the Israel court or in the Isaac Accords. You could see that Israel is done with Europe. They're pivoting. And so that's also an important theme to keep in mind. And we'll talk about that more on this episode. Or on the next speaker was Ronald Lauder, who is the president of the World Jewish Congress. I don't know if we're even allowed to say that. They're allowed to say that. We're not. I don't know. Anyway, he's the 81-year-old billionaire, 4.7 billion, if I remember right. He's the heir to the Estee Lauder makeup company. Girls, I don't wear Estee Lauder. Do you? I don't know who. If you do, please stop. But he's been the president of the World Jewish Congress since 2007, a former chairman of MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, and a major backer of Trump-aligned PACs. He gave $5 million alone in 2024, 2025, and he is a key backer of the 11th million that we previously mentioned. Here he is thanking Sheldon.
Thank you and good morning. Before I begin, I want to say thank you to Miriam Edelson, who has been such a consistent supporter of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. But I cannot talk about Miriam without saying another word about Sheldon. Sheldon was the greatest influence the Jewish people had in the White House, not only in Trump's time, but in Biden's time and all the other times. He was the person, a one-man State Department for Israel, and we can't say enough about him.
Why? So we know Sheldon had unlimited access to the White House. Sheldon is an American-born billionaire, but he's being described as a one-man State Department for Israel, the greatest friend of the Jewish people inside the White House. This man has never held political office, so...
Yeah, what the WJC president there just said qualifies as anti-Semitic under the IHRA definition.
That's like that Nick Fuentes episode where he's like, make laws to make it so they are not allowed to say that we control the laws. And you're like, are you listening to yourself? great. Anyway, here is his sentiment on the current state of anti-Semitism, especially in New York.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I stand here today not with any comfort, but with a great urgency, because what we are facing is no minor issue. It's not a misunderstanding, and it's certainly not an isolated moment. It's a full-scale attack on the truth, on democracy, and on the safety of the people, Jewish people everywhere. For years, some of us warned that anti-Semitism was growing, not in the shadows, but in plain sight, on college campuses, online, in politics, and even in the halls of Congress. Now, anti-Semitism is rampant throughout our culture. For years, too many brushed it aside. They said, it's just a few angry kids. It won't go further. This is America. There is no anti-Semitism in America.
So I'm kind of playing these so you guys get an idea of like that. Like this was the content of pretty much the whole conference. 7 hours of this all day long. They just talked about the need to combat anti-Semitism. Do you have any thoughts before I move on to the leader of the Israeli American Council?
Yeah, I think they're in a difficult situation there where before you can get mainstream media articles out, you've got tons of footage of Israeli action, sometimes posted by Israeli soldiers themselves, which doesn't go with the PR-friendly image which would traditionally be presented through mainstream media. So all of the typical methods of doing Israeli PR are kind of breaking down now.
And that's interesting that you said that. The news came out today that Israel, either they were granted or they approved an over $700 million propaganda budget. And one of my viewers or followers sent it to me and said, they just don't get it. This is no amount of money that you throw at this is going to work. That's also scary because when money stops working, they start using other methods like bombs. So
And the Bondi memo.
And the Bondi memo and El Salvador private prisons. We'll all see you there. We'll be palantired right into CCOD down in El Salvador. Other speakers that talked were Danny Danon, who you can watch his if you want. He's the Israeli ambassador to the UN that you might recognize. He talks about, he quotes saying, the UN has not been able to pass a single resolution condemning October 7th, which I believe those were vetoed by the Israelis anyway because of the verbiage in them, but I'd have to look back. Also, you mentioned earlier the U.S. Assistant Attorney for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, was there, and she was saying anti-Semitism is an issue. She showed off about all of the money and litigation that she has thrown at Harvard. She said, quote, the Biden administration did nothing for Jews. Their pleas fell on deaf ears and called Mamdani an anti-Semitic demagogue, which is like, that's pretty strong language. This is a Sikh woman, by the way. So keep in mind that too. She is the Assistant Attorney General. She's right under Pam Bondi, and now she is equipped with Pam Bondi's memo. So you might want to watch her part as well. The next clip I have is from Elon Carr. He's the CEO of the Israeli American Council. He's also the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, as well as the Deputy DA of LA County and a slew of other things, just a whole list of credentials where he's interfering in the lives of Americans. Obviously, he runs the IAC, the largest organization representing Israeli Americans in the U.S., and serves over 500,000 Israeli expats and their families. Their focus is to build an engaged Israeli American community that preserves Israeli Jewish identity for future generations, strengthen ties between Israeli Americans and the broader American Jewish community, and bolsters U.S.-Israeli relations, and to combat anti-Semitism, obviously. This is also important. You saw Miriam's speech. She talks about they're trying to separate us from the diaspora. That what they really mean is America is kind of separating from Israel. So they're saying they're trying to put a wedge between us and the diaspora. We need to sort of end that. Here's Elon Carr.
And so we are living in a time of miracles and unprecedented opportunities. And the challenge for us here, and with this I'll end because this is key. The challenge for us here is to leverage Israel's successes into our successes and our victories here, because we are one people. Israel's weakness is ours and Israel's strength is ours. And now that Israel has turned the entire geopolitical situation on its head, our job in the diaspora is to leverage those wins and win here. Do to our enemies here what Israel did to its enemies there. And on that, the IAC is focused.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Noah, you have the last word.
Due to our enemies here, this is the thing that people focused on. Due to our enemies here, what Israel did to our enemies there.
Well, that implies just that there are going to be Jewish terrorist organizations in the U.S. Like, that's the clearest read I can get from that.
It's interesting you say that because an article came out, I believe it was either, it might have been in the in the Conservative, I'm not sure, but they talked about IBOX. If you guys Google IBOCS, IBOX, Israeli-based organized crime syndicates, you'll see that we are inundated with these crime syndicates and these sort of Israeli gangs, and that the FBI and the State Department are not allowed to even touch them. They're under a completely different category, and the State Department cannot interfere with their like citizenship status or anything like that. It's insane. It's really insane. But guys, look that up. It's iBox. And now we go to the Queen herself. And I've talked to you guys about this before when we talked about the Epstein files, because everybody said, oh, Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is fine to be put under the bus. He has no political capital anymore. Hillary absolutely 100% does. I don't know if it's in the clip, but in the beginning of her interview, the interviewer says, the Israelis really like you or love you. And she says, the feeling is very mutual. And so let's take a look at what Hillary had to say, and then I'll finish. That'll be the end of me torturing you guys for today.
That our students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people. And it was frankly shocking to me how little the students we were encountering, not only in this class we teach, which is a very large class, international relations about crisis decision making, but students more generally. And that's why I mentioned the social media piece of it, because when you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history, they had very little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda. And so when you think about how to tell Israel's story, and it's important, it's not just looking internally, it's looking externally, and particularly looking at young people, because it's not just the usual suspects, it is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. I was talking to Condi Rice, and she said in an interview that I did after the 20-point plan came out, she and I were on CBS, and she said, when people were chanting from the river to the sea, she would ask the students, what river, what sea? They didn't know. I had the same experience. A lot of the challenge is with younger people. More than 50% of young people in America get their news from social media. So just pause on that for a second. They are seeing short-form videos, some of them totally made up, some of them not at all representing what they claim to be showing, and that's where they get their information.
The kids are not all right, according to Hillary Clinton. They need to be fixed. And I also played her, not just for the sense that she's all in on this propaganda thing, Hasbara thing, but this is, like you said multiple times, this is not one side of the aisle. Everybody is in on this.
Yep. And to Clinton's point that a lot of people are getting their anti-Israel information from social media, the thing is, a lot of it is put out by Israelis. That's what always goes viral on Twitter and often on TikTok, is just confession, or like a confessing bragging. It's media which was intended for a specifically Israeli, or at least specifically Jewish audience, exiting its target audience. It's like what we're doing with this meeting right now.
That's a really good point, is that, and not only that, they can, the Zionist and Israeli elites control a large swath of social media. We've covered even their campaigns to even manipulate it even further. So it's very interesting that that's obviously not going to be included in her take. So I also wanted to point out, now you guys, Doug, you guys in your spaces talk, especially Basil, the media markets literacy. this touches a little bit on that. So if you guys have noticed, Laura Loomer has been going to war with the other Jewish influencers that got to go to Qatar. They went to Doha. Okay. I thought that was kind of suspicious. I said, why do these people keep on like, it's like a Qatar Israeli sort of thing. And then I noticed that I was like looking at this Doha summit and looking at the overlap between the summits we just covered.
Yep.
There's Hillary. I mean, you've got Hillary and Trump, and there's Jolani and Kaya Kallas and Bill Gates and the president of Lebanon. Like it's like all over the place. So they're in Qatar, but we were only getting the news from the Zionists that Tucker was there. Nobody told us about these other people. Guys, go look at the participants. It's a who's who. There's so much overlap. And so I was like, this thing with Qatar feels a little bit manufactured. And then this came out. This is all kayfabe. They're all in it together to develop Palestine into the new Dubai. Don't forget, Qatar helped overthrow Assad. That also helped Syria or helped Israel. If they could get these two on the same page again after the bombings, even better. What are your thoughts on what's on this sort of thing that's been playing out in front of everybody and then behind the scenes?
Yeah, so this Qatar summit especially seems to be ecumenically anti-Iran. It's all of the different Middle Eastern actors, plus, of course, the Western actors, out of work foreign policy heads like Clinton, or you've got Kallas from Finland there. And the thing is, these GCC countries the extent to which they're in lockstep with Israel will vary, but they're always going to be anti-Iran and aligned with the US against Iran. And that's actually an important part to why there were Hamas representatives in Doha in the first place. It's a attempt from the US from 15 years or so ago to try and break the Iran-Hamas relationship by allowing Qatar to host Hamas leadership there.
I agree wholeheartedly. One more thing before we go. This is from 2020, but it's coming up. It's resurfacing now. This is an agreement, an inter-party agreement between Likud and Maria Corina Machado, who leads Vente of Venezuela. So they have been in an inter-party agreement for 5 years. So when we tell you that every war winds up being a Zionist war, this is literally just more of the same. So
Yep.
guys, please keep that in mind and reread the Isaac Accords. But I think that's all I have for you today, unless Doug, you were fantastic as well. But if you have any final thoughts, please share. And anything to plug, anything at all, please feel free.
So final thoughts on that last bit you shared. Yeah, Likud basically is the model which these oftentimes Christian Zionist parties from outside the Middle East will be emulating. There's a particular sort of national conservative, national populist, yet still Zionist politics, which are not just pro-Israel, but are more specifically aligned with Likud. And I mean, Chabad Lubavitch, of course, is also an important through line between several of these. You especially see that in Buenos Aires. But specifically Likud having its own like sub-foreign policy within Israeli foreign policy is something to focus on.
That's really great that you pointed that out, because we've talked about it before as these sort of Zionists and elite moneyed class of Zionists are not all on the same page. They're not a monolith. And I always say, you have the BB Jews and then the BB Zionists, and then you have the George Soros Zionists. And this is exactly that. There's still a cleavage in Israel itself. You still have liberal Zionists and you still have the right wing in Likud. And this is more solidification of Likud's power. Again, since we're on the topic, I forgot to bring it up. Bibi's trial has once again been postponed. So it's I don't know that we're going to get out of this alive, guys. So I'm starting to get a little nervous. Let's go for our super chats. Thank you, Hummus, for joining us every week. And see that little sign next to his name? He's a member of our YouTube community. I don't know. But guys, consider becoming a member, please. I hate when those Brits say Putin. Yes, I do too. Well, if you keep on watching the show and doing super chats and stuff, you'll probably wind up on Pam Bondi's naughty list. So we'll be there with you. Private banks create deposits when extending loans. I like when people send me their like thought stream. That's the headwaters. Okay, Christopher. I'm okay. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Also, I want to tell you guys, Nick Fuentes mentioned Heartland theory and Rimland theory, and so I will mention it too. You guys, if you don't know what that is, I've done it in Spaces, I've done it on the stream. Please go read up on that. Peter Turchin also dropped some new material about the political violence that is coming to a crescendo in the United States, as well as Chris's interviews with the POWs have finally been approved. So we will be releasing them. One is actually being released in 16 minutes on YouTube. So stick around for that. Chris will be back with us again on Wednesday. Keep reading, keep finding us in the spaces. And once again, I want to thank Doug and the book club for participating. This was a really good show, and I'm really glad that you joined us for these topics. So thank you so much. And let me play this teaser of Chris's interviews with the Ukrainian POWs from Kursk. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. It's Sunday. Wednesday. We'll see you guys on Wednesday. Bye.
На фоне этого с 2014 года разрушены связи, родственные связи людей, которые одни живут в Украине, другие в России. Все семьи разрушены. И это печально. Потому что не должно так быть вообще.